Thank you guys for joining us again here at Pursuit of Purpose. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we have with us a very special guest. I'm going to let him introduce himself and tell you guys a little bit about himself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sanders Wilkerson. I'm 61 years old, enjoying this opportunity to share and meet these guys, and we'll see what goes on from there.
I like the way he wears his age as a badge of honor. He just throws it out there. I'm 61 years old, and I don't care who knows it.
No.
That's right.
That's great.
Catch up if you can.
So, Sanders, where were you born?
I was born in Victoria, Texas. Do I look straight?
It doesn't matter. You can look anywhere you want.
I was born in a little small town called Victoria, Texas, in between Corpus and Houston. They used to call it the crossroads of South Texas. We're about 2 hours from every major town in Texas.
Yeah. There's a lot of business in Victoria.
Yes. There is, yeah.
A lot of industrial stuff. Mm-hmm. So you were born in Victoria.
Yes, sir.
Tell us about the home that you were born in, your family.
Okay. Well, we were a very humble household. It was just me and my mom. We lived on Alvin Street, right behind an old grocery store called Newman's. I grew up probably outside of what would be considered normal. I was born in '64. We had a outhouse. I remember.
Had an outhouse.
Yeah, we had an outhouse in the middle of town. That's where it was kind of humble. We also, I was also born by a midwife.
Wow.
Never experienced
born in the house.
Situation. Yes, sir. I remember my grandmother had chickens and some geese and some guineas, just all around the house. Just
nature's alarm clocks.
Yeah. Wood burning fire stove in the living room. That was our heat. Also cooked on it a lot of times when we didn't have any electricity. So a lot of things that I experienced in my life come about from that upbringing.
That's amazing. So you were brought up with a single mother? Is that what you're?
Single mother, yes, sir.
Okay. So how did that impact your life? Growing up without the dad?
There's so many facets to it. One of the things that I remember was the extreme amount of shame when I was growing up. There was a lot of times we didn't have electricity, and we would have to run extension cords from my cousin's house. Or if we knew the water was going to be turned off, well, then we'd load up pots of water and fill up the bathtub full of water, get as much water as we could before they turned it off. And then, we were able to function until my mother was able to get it turned back on. Didn't really have a lot. So I didn't really feel a lot of it until I got in high school.
Yeah.
But there were some amounts and moments that I really felt the shame, just realizing that we didn't have a lot of those things. I remember vividly, my mom would do certain things. She worked a lot. She would also work 2 jobs. So I kind of grew up the only child that was okay being alone. TV was my best friend. And then if it wasn't TV, then she would, of course, make me sit in the house and read. So that was, I had mixed feelings about it. At the time, I thought it was like, well, Mom, I want to go out and play with the guys and do this. And she would always say, well, you're not those guys. You're going to learn something. You're going to read. And so there was those moments. And along with all of that, with the shame of the lack of wealth or anything to provide for us, there was also, I was a big kid, big kind of fat, chubby kid. So, as you know, growing up like that, of course, you're going to get bullied on sometimes, picked at, sometimes laughed about. So I had some internal things going on. But at the same time, my mother had instilled into me some things that now I thank God for. So it's funny how you go through life and you experience things and you look back and you're like, man, this was a big issue. And I was kind of thinking about it this morning before I came up here. I was like, my life is different. It's not what I would have chose, but I wouldn't want to miss any part of it because every integral part of it makes me who I am today.
Boy, isn't that the truth?
Yes, sir.
It's a fascinating thing. As we talked about before the show, we've had a lot of people sit in that chair. A lot of people come on this show. And a very common thread among all these people, and I consider them all to be successes in their own right, but a common thread is that none of them are living the life they would have chosen back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
From the people that we admire, people I like, personal heroes of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West,
Wow.
guys like that, none of them are living the life that they thought they would be living. Right. And they all say the same thing. Had it not been for this journey, I wouldn't be sitting where I am. Don't know where I'd be.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the life. This is the life I choose now.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm proud of it.
Awesome.
So it sounds to me like you share that sentiment, that you're very proud of the life you have.
I'm proud. I'm very grateful that I even have a life. As we get more into my story, you'll see why I say that.
So tell me about discipline in that home, in that childhood home. So you didn't have a father figure necessarily in the house.
No.
So what was discipline like? Well, I know that little Sanders probably didn't follow every rule.
No, sir. No, sir. There's an old adage that you may have heard that when they say a woman can't make a boy into a man. But my mother, she did the best she could with what she did, and she did not spare the rod. Mm-hmm. She was very, very assertive in that area, and I often did a lot of things. I was not a great child, to say, and she did not mind putting forth the corporal punishment.
Yeah, so you got your share of weakness.
Oh, yeah, from everything. Whatever she could put her hands on, extension cords, shoes, whatever she could grab. Or, those days where she would make you go outside and grab a switch off the peach tree. Yeah. It wasn't big enough, then she had to go get it. It got worse.
Oh, yeah.
So,
been through many of those things myself. Many.
Yes, sir.
But she was determined.
She was definitely determined. Not only that aspect of it, but even when it got to, I remember this one time I was in the second grade and I had to go to the store. And I went to the store and this young man in the fourth grade happened to walk up on me in the aisle and he hit me in the eye. And I went home crying and expecting to get some comfort and compassion. Well, that's not what I got.
Oh, no. Oh, man.
So, and I can't really say what she said,
right?
But she said a few words to me, and in essence, she said, "Look, I don't raise no weak. I'm gonna just say it like this: I don't raise any weak men in my house."
Oh,
So you go back out there, you find that young man, and you better hit him like he hit you. At least. Well, I was a big kid, but still hadn't really blossomed into any of that. So I went back, I found him, and we had a fight. And next day I got in trouble at school. And but that was it. It was kind of like, well, okay, mom's giving me the green light. So every chance I got,
handle business,
I would do whatever. And then she pulled me back. Wait, you're out of control now. Hold on. If somebody messed with you,
you took it too far.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So that's funny, but that's definitely the kind of household I grew up in.
Isn't that its own form of discipline, though? Because the phrase "you took it too far" is the reason we have discipline. It's always my mouth is running, I'm saying too much, or I'm too loud or whatever. And so, fighting back's okay.
Yeah.
She's like, not fighting first.
Yeah.
No. And so she got it in line. So it wasn't a no, it was just a this way. Yes, I like her.
Yes,
I like her. Yeah.
She's a remarkable woman.
Yeah, she's still with you?
No, sir. She passed away in 2021.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, sorry for your loss. Was it COVID related or just other? Well, I am sorry to hear that.
Did she stay in the Victoria area? I know
my mother lived in Victoria, and she has a remarkable story just on her own. I mean, I could talk to you all day just about the life that she led and the things that she ended up accomplishing later on in life. So maybe as time goes, little bits of excerpts of that will come out.
Good. Yeah, that'd be great.
It would be.
So you grew up in a home and in a family that was ruled by women.
Yes, sir.
You had your mom and your grandma kind of guiding you through life. Were there any male figures in your life that you gleaned mentorship from at all?
I had two uncles. One lived in Houston, and then one lived with us. My uncle that was in Houston, he was he worked hard, but he was a full-fledged alcoholic. And my uncle that lived with us from time to time, he was a heroin addict.
Okay.
So I didn't have really great role models. And there were times that my mom would have different men or beaux that would come around, but they weren't anybody or anyone that I sought to say that this is how I pattern myself after. Now, my aunts, eventually they came around and they did pretty good for themselves. And they had some outstanding men. And when I had an opportunity, I would watch and listen and try to, but at that time I was so young, I didn't really understand. But I knew there was something that was different.
Yeah.
For
sure.
Well, that's, I think that something you said that, people say a mother can't raise a man. I would not agree with that.
Right.
Yes.
I think that it's entirely possible that a mother can raise a man.
I think so too.
Because integrity, it can be illustrated by no matter what gender the parent.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the key fundamental for manhood.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Is integrity and good character.
Right.
So whether or not she could illustrate manhood to you, she could show you what it was to become a person of good character.
She did that.
Yes. High moral standards.
Right. And her expectation of some of those best habits, like reading.
Yes.
At the time it probably seemed like a punishment, but as time went on, you're like, well, that's got you turning into a bit of an asset. And so thank you, Mama, for that. And so there's other good adult qualities and forming that into manhood as well.
Yes.
So yeah.
So you were a single child. That is amazing. My wife is also only child, and she shares a lot of those similarities to you. Now she loves to read, and I think she even loved to read as her nerdy little younger self.
Okay.
I think she liked to read a lot, but she also had no father figure for the most of her life, and no mother figure either, for that matter. But so I commend you for the man you have become, regardless of whatever possible trials you may have gone through.
Yes, sir.
Look at where you are now. You have honored her well.
I try. Yes, sir.
You're doing a good job at it. So when you were a kid, I don't know, 14, 15 years old, what did you want to be when you grow up?
Around 14 and 15, I was still an impressionable young man. I still had hopes and dreams of accomplishing things. I really started like playing with computers. I would tinker a lot. I thought about becoming an engineer, and I thought of all these good things. But about the age of 16, I ran across my first drug. So I kind of began to get away. At that time, I was in the math club and chess club and science club and doing all those things. And then my life took a drastic turn.
How did that happen? How was the first interaction with a substance? How was that introduced to you?
It was actually, and as I look back, I remember I was horrified about the incident. Now, mind you, this is a different time. And we were in a little town called Hallettsville, Texas. And so it's about 45 miles from Victoria. And back then, families did everything, even to the point that we would go to the old nightclubs in the middle of the day. They were open, and the families and the kids were all playing around, and the women and the men would be at the tables playing dominoes or talking and drinking. And so that was our thing. And even to the point that where, like, when I was a child, my mom would just say, boy, go up there and get me a beer. And I would just go up to the bartender and say, my mom wants a beer. And they hand me the beer and walk. So it was just different.
Yeah.
So the alcohol never was a thing for me. But I turned about 16, and one of my mom's boyfriends had some older children. And I jumped in the car with him. And one night we had been at the club all day, and we went and took a ride, and I'm in the back seat with the two guys, and they were probably about 19 or 20, and I'm 16. So they opened up this matchbox, and there was some marijuana in it. And I tried to be cool, like I'm okay with it, and as they did, but when we got back to the club, I was frightened. I've never encountered anything like that. I didn't partake of it at the moment, but it brought about some emotions in me that I wasn't quite ready to handle. So I was shook up about it.
Confused.
I was very, very, very confused. And about 3 to 6 months later, I tried it my first time, and I just succumbed to it. I loved that smoking of marijuana. And so I did that for, about 12 years or more.
Wow.
And almost every day if I could. And it was just part of my lifestyle.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to ask some questions about that. During that time when you were using marijuana, what was it that it was helping you with or making you feel better about?
The marijuana gave me an opportunity to escape from the thoughts that were still in the back of my head, Robert. So mind you, I was still in my mind, no matter what happened and what was going on in my life. I'm still a little fat kid. I'm still a little poor kid, didn't have anything. I'm still a little kid that had 2 pair of jeans that would wash one every day, or slacks, and I had to wash them. I had a couple of shirts, so I had to wash my clothes every day. And so there was all these things that it gave me a sense of escape from. I didn't have to think about that anymore.
So you had anxiety about feeling less than.
Yes, sir.
If that's a good interpretation.
On all fronts. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the marijuana gave you that
it gave me
release
a
of that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So would you say, in your opinion, was it an addictive substance, or was it the habit of the escape that was the addiction?
I don't think the marijuana was an addictive substance in itself, but I think I had an addictive personality.
Okay. That's fair enough. That makes a lot of sense. So did you do anything else other than the marijuana?
Eventually. So
12 years is a long time.
Yeah, 12 years is a long time. So eventually I stopped, and so I graduated at 18, left Victoria,
You did graduate.
Texas.
I was going to ask that. That's good.
I graduated at 18, left Victoria, Texas, and moved to to Dallas with my aunt and her husband. And that's the first time I would say that I really began to cling to a male figure.
Okay.
So my uncle, who was about 6'6", popular basketball player, he at the time managed 6 McDonald's for this other gentleman in Dallas. And he was the first picture of someone that I saw that looked like me, that was successful. He had a nice car. He bought my aunt very nice cars. He had a nice apartment. He wore tailor-made suits. I mean, he did these things. And in my mind, I'm looking at him and I'm like, this is what I'm supposed to be like.
Okay.
Now, he also had another side to him. He showed me that side too. Now, he still would smoke marijuana. And I remember vividly, when I first got there, and we went on a long ride, and he was showing me about Dallas and how to drive the Mixmaster, and telling me, hey, you always want to make sure you're in front of the cars. Don't get in a big crowd of cars, because if something happens, you're going to be in a major wreck or something. So drive out until you get away from them, get into a spot where yourself, and then just kind of cruise. So he took me to his girlfriend's house. And again, I began to pick up values of what I thought a man would do. He's going to be successful. He's going to provide for his family, but he's going to have outlets as well. Yeah. And so I automatically thought that was good, and the way every man would be or should be.
At least it was okay.
Yeah. Yes.
So to have a family, but also to have side business as well.
Yes.
So did he introduce you to any other activities?
He gave me a stern warning. He would tell me, marijuana is okay, but leave everything else alone. It's no good for you. It's going to wreck and damage your life. Of course, I did not heed to that. Yeah. I got in Dallas and began to dabble in other things.
Everything's available in Dallas. Yeah. I mean, it's available everywhere, but in Dallas, it's very prevalent. Right.
That's when I first encountered cocaine.
Okay. Yes, sir. So when you say cocaine, you're talking about the regular powder form?
It started with powder. Okay. I'd never liked the snorting or burning of my nose. So this is 83.
Okay.
And 84. And
the heyday of cocaine.
Heyday of cocaine, right. And I left the powder, and we would do what they call freebase.
Oh, yeah.
And after freebase, then, of course, crack cocaine came on the scene.
and I don't know a whole lot. I mean, I was a kid back then, but from what I can understand, you went from the most expensive to the middle and then the cheapest form. And that
cheapest, most addictive.
Yes, and that was the natural progression. From what I understand, that was how it gets you.
Right.
You start buying the high end stuff, and then you start running out of money.
Yep.
So you step it down a notch, but it increases in its draw as you step down in quality and lower prices.
Right.
By the end of it, that crack just, man, it owns you.
Yes.
So how long were you involved in that?
I was what you would call a functioning addict. So off and on for about 15 years, I smoked crack cocaine.
Okay. So during that time, were you also able to work?
At that time, when I first started, I was in Dallas still. I managed, I was like a swing manager at one of the McDonald's. Okay. And I managed to do that for a while until the cocaine addiction kind of took over. And I found myself at a point to where I reached out and I cried out to one of my friends. It was I guess the first of critical turning points for my life. I reached out to him. He sent me the money for a bus ticket. I smoked it up. I called him again, sent me some more money for a bus ticket. And of course, I did the same thing. And then finally, I just said, look, can you send me a non-refundable ticket? Of which he did. And I found myself back in Victoria, Texas. And I thought I was safe. You know, there's this thing where you figure, well, it's just the area. If I can just get away from the area. Sure. But, you know, wherever you go, there you are.
So it wasn't.
Yes. It had nothing to do with my physical or geographical location. Right. It had everything to do with my mental and my spiritual void that I had. And so I found myself back in Victoria, Texas, an opportunity to try to get my life together. In the meantime, I had managed to finish a little vocational school, and I had a degree in electronics. And I went back to Victoria, and I was with my mom, kind of living, trying to do life. And May of 1988, I got my first job at a chemical plant. Really? And which made it very easy for me then to leave the marijuana alone.
Because they test you.
Because they test.
That's right.
So I thought I had it all figured out in my mind. Well, everything is good. So I went to work. My life, things began to look up, and I began to see maybe something better about that I really wanted for my life. So I began to feel good to a degree, but yet every now and then the little fat kid would rear his ugly head and it would expose itself. And I didn't quite know how to deal with it. So I would find myself dabbling. It would be like a 2 or 3 month deal. I would smoke and then I'd stop and have to pay all my debts back off, pay off all the hot checks, and I would go about 3 to 6 months, and then I would do it again. So off and on for about another 8 years, I was doing that.
Were you able to maintain work?
I maintained work to a degree. I had at that time had met a young woman, and she was a little bit older than me, but she was good. She had her own little issues, and we mixed together well. I kind of helped her, and she kind of, we were two dysfunctional people, and it was like the both of us together made one person. So there wasn't no complete wholeness.
Codependent.
The codependent definitely is what it was. And eventually, again, my drug use got the best of me. I ended up just after helping her heal from an abusive relationship, I began to do my mental and emotional abuse upon her from, keeping a job and doing well and things looking good. And then next thing you know, she doesn't know where I'm at for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
And so we eventually just wasn't able to make it. And she told me, you've hurt me more than my previous husband who would beat me. And that was kind of hard.
Yeah.
But as I look back on my life, and I understand that she was something for me that I needed. She was something that I thought that made me complete. So it's, again, if it wasn't for the drugs, it was the money of working at the plant. I was able to I would wear a lot of gaudy gold. I wore gold chains, gold necklaces, just to try to give the illusion that I'm not that little poor kid anymore. And then my wife was extremely good looking. And then I tried to do the same thing with relationships on the side that would make me, that if people saw me, they wouldn't see the fat kid. They wouldn't see the poor kid. You saw a big guy with a nice car, a lot of jewelry, nice clothes, and then he always had a beautiful woman on the side. So I'm just trying to mask myself the entire time.
Yes.
And as you know, that eventually all that wears off.
Sure.
You were protecting that vulnerability.
Yes.
Right.
To an extreme degree.
Right.
Yes.
When you're in the middle of it, I know people would not know that. You would not know that's what I'm doing
Exactly.
until it fails.
Yes.
Yeah. So instead of making yourself more into something and having that discipline, which we kind of talked about earlier with Mom, you said you were just masking, and that is so common. We have a lot of folks that come through our world that they'll do that to some degree, maybe not to an extreme destruction, but there's a path of destruction, and without confrontation, it's not going to end well.
No, sir.
Yeah, which I presume it didn't.
It did.
And what's fascinating is there has to come this moment where it's you confronting you.
Exactly.
It's not an external force that's pushing you to do better or causing you to change.
No,
it's you. It has to be you, or it won't work.
Exactly.
That's right.
From my own life, I share some similar failures. I've been very blessed that I haven't had substance addiction, but I have had other behavioral issues, some similarities to you. And I can tell you that I would have lived in denial forever.
Yes.
And continued to compensate for those vulnerabilities by using that. It's really, looking back on it, you can only imagine, but I have to speculate that so many people probably saw right through me. You know what I mean? Like, right. Look at this guy. You know how silly he is. He thinks he's, big shot or whatever. That's pitiful. You know what I mean? Exactly. And they have to see it. And that's how I think of it now. I look back on that. But do you think that in your life people could see?
Oh, I'm pretty sure there were times that people saw right through me.
Yeah.
But I guess as you go through it, and especially once you become overtaken by drug use, you learn to play a role and put on a character. It's a part of survival. There were times I remember that I'd gotten so strung out and so bad that I would have to learn to get away with things. So I was too scary to do any kind of real crime at first. And so I would write hot checks. And I remember I began to look for a pattern. I always wanted to go to a gas station where there was a young woman, because I could make her laugh and get her mind off of what she's doing. And I would be able to write a check. I even wrote a check one time with one of my old checks up on the wall. Back in the day, they would put this check.
Yeah, I remember those things. Yeah.
And I convinced this young lady that this is, don't worry about it. That's been taken care of. I don't know why it's up there. And I wrote another check. So that just kept feeding this ego. There's nothing I can just talk myself out of things. I can just do this and do that. And so I never really had to deal with who I was or really fully be cognizant of my actions at that point. There was no conscious.
Right.
Because at that point now my addiction had begun to take over, and I noticed that I began to change. I wasn't who I thought I was anymore. And the things that I thought I would never do, as far as my mom never, she never taught me to be a violent person. She taught me to defend myself.
Right.
But she never taught me to bully people, to take advantage of people. Right. And eventually I found myself being able to do some of those things. So that I'm not proud of that.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you a question now. I mean, we're going to skip ahead a little bit, but I know that you're in a mentoring role.
Yes, sir.
In another part of your life now. And I find it fascinating. I'm going to ask you, do you notice old behaviors from your past showing themselves in young men and people, and it makes you want to be like, wake up.
Yes.
What's the matter with you? I've been where you're at. Stop it.
Right.
And it makes you want to shake them and be like, look, man, this is going to hurt you, you know? And
you're spot on. But the struggle for me is, well, and I wish I had time to tell it all, but the struggle for me is the fact that now it seems like God has been having me deal with, since I did my internment in prison, God has had me deal with youth. And so here I was not a good father, was not a good stepfather, never had any good solid foundation for anything. And now here I am dealing with children that I don't even understand this generation. And not saying anything bad with this generation. I just don't understand them.
Right. They speak different language.
They do. And so me trying to be around them, it's been a challenge. And so what I realized is I can't just go preaching to them.
Right.
I can't.
They don't accept preaching.
No.
And truthfully, neither did you.
No, I didn't.
No one accepts preaching. And that's why I don't understand. But keep going.
So what I'm finding works best for me is just being there, because a lot of them were like me. They didn't have a male role model. They didn't have a father figure. They didn't have any of those things. So just being there, I let them be them. I don't try to go in and change them, pull your pants up, do this, do that. Right. And I think eventually some of those things will take place. But right now they just need to identify with something. They need to see that there's something different in life than where they are. So
they need to lose the shame of that fat kid that lives in the back of their head.
Yes.
I guess if we do expose ourselves to and the character that is to these young people, eventually the hope is they will be curious and they'll see, especially if they eventually get around to asking you, like, man, why are you here? Why are you working with? Oh, I'm glad you finally asked. And then you get to tell them that history. They're like, oh, you were me. Yes, I was.
And that's not preaching.
And that's not preaching. That's right.
Yeah.
And you then you get to say, okay, now would you like to know how to get to where I am?
Exactly.
And hopefully they'll be curious enough to want to know. So I like that. I mean, but what a very patient ministry that must be.
You have to.
You can't have that direct direction change like we would prefer.
Right.
Anyway, let's get this going right now. And you've learned that being a mentor, that's not going to happen at that pace.
They're very. I think the generation now is very watchful, cautious, and a lot of them have a reason to be. There's never been very good models around them. Some of them, even their immediate family, has caused them a lot of harm.
Oh yeah.
So they don't trust anyone.
Right.
But they are constantly looking for something to emulate. That's one thing I understand about those children. So we just kind of sit back and let them begin to identify. And eventually I think they come around. The big thing is, as I tell my story, I try to share with them. And sometimes it requires that I get really graphic because some of the kids need that.
Yeah.
They need to understand that some of the very things that they think that would make them that would give them a badge of honor, it's not as pretty as the world would like you to think it is.
That's right.
And so that requires that. And then at other times, you just kind of sit back and just kind of wait. You have if you're an excellent speaker, you may have 15, 20 minutes tops with a young person. And you better be a good speaker.
Yeah.
Because after that, the light goes off and their mind is going somewhere else.
Wow.
So you have that little moment of what I call high impact moment. And those moments are rare, but they're always something that I believe God opens the door for. And so you have to be ready for when God opens that door, you recognize it, what it is, and you say what you have to say and hit that point and you back out of it. And now you just be their friend again. And I think those are the moments that carries with them, that resonates with them. And I don't know if I'll ever see all of it or if I see any of it come to pass, but you just have to believe that there was something that was said. And
you're planting seeds.
That's that. You got it right.
You don't ever get to see the result of every seed that gets planted.
Right.
You just know that there will be a harvest one day.
That has
Right.
yes,
You have faith.
you have to, yes, sir. Or else why do it, right?
That's right.
That's why the Bible uses the mustard seed reference.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Because all those little mustard seeds,
Yes, sir.
you'll never see where
No,
you know
sir.
where all they grow and what all they become.
Right.
No,
And
sir.
who gets to enjoy that harvest and all
Yeah.
that. Yeah. It happens a lot. I know in the counseling coaching businesses, we have our moment, we have our season.
Mm-hmm.
And then now that I've done this for a while, I'll run into people that I hadn't seen in maybe a decade or more,
Mm-hmm.
and they fill you in the gaps, and they're like, yeah, well, I know you probably don't remember, and I don't mean to burden you. I go, I would have no other way of knowing
Wow.
the rest of the story. I was just there for a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Tell me about the kid that's now in his 20s and what he's up to and all that.
That's encouraging,
So,
isn't it?
Yes.
It's encouraging. It's a gift that God gives to let us know that we're on the right path.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe Paul says it on this wise. He says, I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God gives the increase. And so we just have to do our little part.
That's right.
And just trust that he's going to make it come to pass.
That's right.
Well, I'm going to back you up just a little bit. Because
Okay.
You touched on it, but we didn't get this far.
Okay.
You went to prison.
Yes, sir.
How'd you get there?
Well, eventually the checks run out. I ran out of checkbooks. I ran out of my little 401k. I didn't have anything left to do. And I found myself living out of my car and whatever else I could muster up. And things began to get darker and darker in my life. And I left my wife, left the family, because it was just too much to even bear, just the shame of some of the things that I exposed him to. And I found myself committing my first robbery. I committed the robbery with a friend of mine, and he kind of showed me how it went. And so we got away with it. And after a while later, I tried it again. And I actually tried to show someone else how to do it. And I was calling myself trying to trick them into performing it. Because like I'm 6'4", 360 pounds at the time. I can't go in there and rob this convenience store because everybody in the world, I mean, I'm easy to recognize, right? So, and this guy, medium height, medium build, you do it. And so we rolled around the store 3 or 4 times, and he just never mustered up the courage. And I got frustrated. I wanted to get high. So I went in and I performed the robbery, left. We got away with it. So I did it again. So we did 2. The second one, we were coming back, and I pulled around the corner, and I stopped, and I changed and threw my shirt away and threw it in the trunk of the car. And as we took off, well, the cop saw the light of my tail light. So he comes over, pulls us over, and I had the money in my hand, and I'm driving. So I said, hey, man, just hold this money. They're looking for me because I went in there. And if I don't have anything, they'll search the car, but they don't, we'll get away with it. So, of course, I gave him the money, and the cops pulled us over. And little did I know, he slid the money back on my side. And I found myself in going to prison. So at that time, I was already on probation. So I blew probation, and there I was, the turning point of my life. I was facing 3 10-year robbery sentences, and they ran them concurrently. So, but of course, when the sheriff talked to me, he told me, you're looking at 30 years. Well, at that time, I was 36 years old. I was a grown man, knew what it was like to be a productive member of society to a degree. And my life had spiraled down to nothing. And so when they told me that, I went, I was in prison. I had to go. I'll never forget that moment. As I sit there, the officer talked to me, and he had to ask me this series of questions. And one of the questions he asked me, he says, are you okay? And I said, no. He says, are you going to harm yourself? And I said, I don't know. And so they stuck me in the medical ward. They kept me on amitriptyline for about 2 weeks because I just could not deal with the reality that I had really just bombed my life. And so I just did a lot of sleeping, and I never forget, if eventually left the county jail, and I went to my first stint in prison, and it was so horrifying when we got out and we were in the little gateway. They stripped us down of our clothes, and they proceeded to just berate us, belittle us, talk crazy to us. And as I walked in to where you go get showered and shaved up, when I walked in the door, there were like 4 guys. They had just had a riot at the Beeville unit, at one of the Garza West units. And so there was like 4 guys with big old gashes in the back of their head and big Band-Aids. And I walked in and my knees began to stumble because I was terrified. I didn't know what to expect. And so I found myself in prison. And to make matters worse, I was friendly I had a little bit of money because my mom had gave me some. And before I left, I had made commissary. Well, when you leave the county to go to the prison, you can't take it with you. So I gave it all away. And I didn't have any money. So then when I get to the prison, I didn't have any money to buy shower shoes or anything else. And so I was really kind of bummed out. That was the first time in my life I really felt just hopeless. I didn't have any opportunity to do anything. I didn't know these people, and I was leery. Yeah, you don't ask anybody for anything because if they owe you something, it's going to come out bad in the end. So I knew, those little things. I heard the stories. There were people there, and so it was there that I finally hit bottom. It was where God says, "Okay, now I have you in a spot where I can talk to you." I didn't have any distractions. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any women. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any opportunity to influence anyone. And it was a defining moment for me, just to be in that position and then to realize that I had basically given up all control over anything that I have in my life. But I still realized, even at that moment, that I still, and I guess it's hard for me to say this. It's kind of like a contradiction in terms. At one point, I had such a horrible, low self-esteem, but at the same time, because of the behaviors that I had practiced and honed the skills in order to pull off things, I had this huge ego.
Isn't that fascinating?
And it is fascinating to me now that I had this. And I guess it's just human nature sometimes where you should be at your bottom, you still find a way to put somebody else below you. Mm. And I never forget when we went in to get assigned to our positions, the administrator looked at me and I'm like, well, surely I'm an operator at the plant, this and this and that. Surely I'm gonna get this great job, right? Well, she looks at me, she looks at my record, she looked at what I've done, and she says, all crackheads go to the whole squad. So I was like, why? Wait a minute, I'm going to be an educator? Am I going to be anything? Can I work in the school system? No, you're going to the whole squad. So the whole squad was, you get out there and you get an ag in your hand and you rake up. I was in a form, so I did that part. So that's where things began to happen. At that time, I started going to church a lot and started studying. I would read God's word. And I kind of started that in the county, but I realized I had done so much drugs and so much had happened in my life that where I couldn't even speak anymore. So I would get up in the mornings and I would read out loud the editorial pages of the Victoria Advocate to kind of help my speech again. Because I basically just couldn't talk. I mean, very limited choice of words. So that's where I first started. Then I would read the Bible. And so at one of the units I was on, I never forget, there was a female chaplain, and she come through and she would lay hands on people, and I wasn't ready for none of that, And eventually, God had begun to work on me. And I finally says, well, Lord, if this is what it takes, this is what you want me to do, then I'll do it. Mm. And she laid hands on me and I fell down in the gym, didn't even hurt myself, didn't flop around, wasn't speaking in tongues or anything. But it was just a moment that I felt the presence of God on me. And it was just this comfort. It's like, okay, Now you're ready. And it took me to lose everything about myself and about what I thought I was for him to begin to minister to me. And so I would read and study God's word every day. And then I began to notice he would talk to me even when I'm out there in the fields, and we were walking. I remember one cold morning and I'm out there and we're picking cabbage and it was cold. I mean, it's just freezing cold. And I'm walking down these rows, these turn rows, and I'm looking at all these cabbages and I'm like, I don't understand this. How are all these cabbages getting the same amount of sun, same amount of water? Why are they different sizes? And that the word now begins to start speaking back to me. And it was like some 20, some 30, some 100. So it's like, okay, I understand now. And I began to just get filled with God's word. And I found myself in a spot where I was happier than I ever been. And it's weird, locked up in prison, but full of joy. And I would notice that even some of the officers would look at me and like, what you so happy about? And I began to understand that the external things don't make you and give you joy or peace. And we spend all our life, all our times trying to cover ourselves up, trying to emasculate what we really are, our feelings and what we care about, to try to present this image. And if you buy this image of me, it doesn't matter that it's really not me, as long as you bought this image of me, that I would be okay. And God had finally wiped all of it out and I felt free. But there was still, it's not like a one and done type thing. I mean, that's not the way life works for me. It may be for those people out there that God touches them one time and they make a 180 and they go the straight and narrow all their life. Man, and more power to you. Hallelujah. Praise God. But I was stubborn. And I'll never forget, I sit there for 8.5 years on those 3 10-year sentences. And I would look and God would show me things. There was this one man who came and went to prison 3 times while I was there. And I'm like, I don't understand this. This guy has gone and come back 3 times. And I'm still here at this time. Now I'm at the trustee camp, trusted, but not trusted enough to let go. I'm like, God, what's going on? Why? And it wasn't until I got out that I understood that God had a plan and a purpose for my life. So I got out in July of 2006. And by the end of July of 2006, they moved me to Odessa, Texas. They wouldn't let me go back to Victoria. And I went to a little church. I found a little church there. I started going to this church there. And I met a man who had just started going to the church. Kind of resembled my uncle, about 6'6", good-looking young man, very distinguished gentleman. And I saw this is somebody, I'm still looking for this role model. Still, even at that age, it's funny. And I wanted someone to pattern myself because I was still lost. And I found this man and he things are going good for him. And I'm working at Family Dollar, driving a forklift, and I'm just trying to do something, just trying to make something happen. And I never forget, I went to see my mom and I came back home and I'm like, okay, I think things are good. And we had a talk. And I said, Larry, I think things are going good. He said, really? I said, yes, sir. I said, man, I got me a little apartment. I got me a little car. It's $250 Mercury Sable. 3 of the windows didn't roll down. No AC. But it was a car. It was mine. And I had me a cell phone. And I told him, I said, now I'm ready to try to get back out in the plant. And he says, oh, really? I said, yes, sir. I want to try to go to that Huntsman plant that you have there. And I'll never forget it. He looked at me and he says, well, come on, I'm hiring. And it was just another God moment. I said, well, hold on. Let me tell you about me. Because I did not want to get started somewhere and have the rug yanked out from under me. So I began to tell him these things. And Larry said, well, stop. He says, when was this? And I told him, he says, stop. He says, our records go back 7 years. You've been gone 8.5 years. And that's when I began to understand that God had a purpose.
That's right.
Every moment that I thought that it was something that steadily being punished or I wasn't good enough, I wasn't this and that, God is like, I got this. trust me. And so needless to say, in November of 2006, I get hired at the plant. And in February of 2006, I get bumped up from a beginning pay from a class E or D to a B operator, which is like unheard of, So there's usually like a rating, but people began to show me favor, and it wasn't because of anything but God. I got the job. I started working. Doors began to open, and I was humbled by the fact that all of this happened. I began to go and stay heavily involved in the little Baptist church I was part of. I announced my call there at that church, and then they shut the plant down. Well, in between that, so let me back up. So they had sold the plant to another plant, and of course my fears began to rise up. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe that was a one opportunity and I had it. Lord, thank you for whatever it is, and I'll do whatever I need to do. Well, because they were going to do the background check all over again. And I struggled with it. Should I lie? Should I do this? Should I do that? And I was like, God, I just got to trust you, So I was forthright, did it all. And there was never a blip, never a blink. And I'm stuck with the company. Well, about a year later, they shut it down. And I found myself trying to find other jobs, other plants. And so about 2 months after that, they called me and there was an opportunity for me to come to Port Arthur. And so needless to say, in every one of those instances, there was still the fear. And God kept saying, man, trust me, man. I got you. Just trust me. But the human nature side of me, I wanted to try to put it on me or what, And so out of all of those lessons, God had begun to show me time and time again that his grace is sufficient. He began to show me that my weakness made him strong. That my strength was his, and that my weakness, he was strong enough for me to carry me and to do those things for me. So needless to say, I got to Beaumont, began to work and began the prison ministry. And I've been doing that ever since in 2009. And I'm now at another chemical plant. I'm a safety specialist at one of the plants. And God never ceases to amaze me. Just had a little vocational school training. And yet I sit in the role that I'm in now. I'm not technically trained. I'm not a technically trained writer, but I write procedures. I do life critical things. And it's amazing because most people in that role are college educated and have all these degrees. And I sit there and it's just a constant reminder that God has me. And so everything that I've learned from my experiences in my life, I've learned one critical thing, that you cannot get anywhere in life without pouring out of yourself.
That's right.
There was an old preacher that would come visit us in the penitentiary, and he said, "There's 4 things you can do to stay out of prison. 4 things, and you'll never come back. 4 things." And I wrote them down in my Bible. And he said, the first thing you do is you need to get yourself up every morning and read and study God's word daily. He said, the second thing, when you get home, he says, find you a Bible-believing, Bible-teaching church. And then the third thing is to do whatever you can in that church. I don't care if you're sweeping the floor, picking up trash, cutting the grass, find something to do in that church. And then the fourth thing he said was, you need to learn to get out of yourself. In other words, you need to learn to live your life on an altruistic plane. In other words, it's not about me. I can only survive if I pour out of what God given me into somebody else. And that means getting out of myself. That means realizing that if it wasn't for his grace, that I'd be there. So God has blessed me. And I didn't tell you those things about my mother. My mother worked at the school system, and she had a passion for helping kids. So after she retired, she began to do what was a different type of food giveaways. And one of the things that she was known for in Victoria, Texas, is the Christmas giveaway. And she had it set up. My mom didn't have any. Now, mind you, this is a woman that never drove, never had a driver's license in her life. Yet she was able to function and do things that blows my mind today. We try to mimic it. So my mom had this movement called the Old Landmark Society, and she would provide a hot meal, and she would get Christmas gifts and kids and toys and clothing, and she would do this. And she didn't have any money herself. She lived on Social Security, about $700 a month, and she was able to do those things. So when my mom passed, by then, me and a friend of mine tried to help do it. Now, that's hard to do from one town to do it in another place. But we did that, and we try to take on with it. But it never fails me every time I'm there, and we begin to do what we can, and to see some of the people that I grew up with, who just a defining moment for me. One time I was there last year, and we were giving away food, and one of my dealers who I used to buy from rode up, got in line on a bicycle, and we gave him 2 bags of groceries so he could carry home. And it was a tough time, man. It was a tough time because I felt the grace of God on my life. And I knew that if it wasn't for God, that I could be that guy.
Yeah. Or worse.
Or if I was even alive, Yes. So it's fulfilling.
Yes.
And it's my driving source to be able to help people in any kind of form or fashion. And it never disappoints me. To go into the youth facilities or to go into the prisons. When I leave, I felt like I end up picking up more than I dropped off.
Yeah.
And so that's my story, guys.
That's beautiful. So
it is.
You told a story of fruit.
Yes.
And I don't know if you'll like this analogy or not, but if you don't mind, I'm going to tell it. So your life, I mean, you're a piece of fruit. So what does it take for a piece of fruit to have value to anyone? Well, first, it has to be grown on a tree. It has to weather storms. It has to go through different seasons and periods. It comes from that tree, and it doesn't grow in perfect conditions for it to taste good, right?
Yeah.
And then most of the time, that fruit falls from the tree, right? And it hits what?
The ground.
Hard.
Definitely. Yes.
They don't fall from a close spot. They hit the ground, and when they hit the ground, they bruise, right?
Yes, sir.
Almost all fruit, don't matter if it's an orange, it can bruise. So then that fruit gets picked up. But that fruit can't be consumed until what happens to it? It has to be destroyed.
Wow.
The outer layers that protect the sweetness within
I like that.
has to be completely destroyed and ripped off. Then what's exposed? The truth, your truth, and the seeds that laid within to plant your story. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. So,
Billy Graham once said, "Only fruits and flowers grow in the valley. They don't grow up in the valley." So you had hit that, and you learned lots of things, I know, but you learned how to die to self.
Yes, sir.
And because that's where you were. You said I was in a moment. I had absolutely nothing. That's when we die.
Yeah.
We have nothing. It's just us and God.
Yes,
because everything we thought we had is left behind.
Yes, sir.
So you had a living, dying moment, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
That 8.5 years you spent in the pen, he was making sure you were ripe and ready
Yes, sir.
to have the peel ripped off.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
At that perfect moment. That's beautiful.
That is.
So,
thank you.
I'd like to ask you a question, and we ask everybody this.
Okay.
Are you a success?
Not in a sense of what I would deem someone successful.
Well, if you're not a success, then none of us have a chance.
I think that I'm an overcomer.
Well, what's the definition of success if it's not being an overcomer?
That's true. That's true.
Help me see it a different way. Because my friend, I see you as a success.
Yes.
And I would challenge you that anyone else that gets to see or hear this interview, they're going to see you or hear you as a success.
Right.
So what else could you be? You might not be finished.
Yes, sir.
And that's okay. But by all measure, in my mind, and I hope in yours,
yes, sir,
you are a success.
Well, thank you for that. I need to hear that today.
Well, so what do you think separates someone who is successful from someone who is not?
Wow. I think it would be the fact that someone who is not successful is merely because they've just given up.
Okay.
They've lost all hope. And I really think our success, for me, my success only comes through the grace of God. I think he desires that good for all of us. But at some point, we stop believing. At some point, we stop looking for what God has in store for us. Now, you're right, Robert. To be honest with you, I think our success, what we look at sometimes as success, doesn't make you a success. The happiness, peace of mind. I am successful. I'm successful because I shouldn't have, but I did, and it's because of him. And I could have given up. I could have just laid it down, but the love of God just would not let me give up. And so the people that are not successful doesn't mean that they will never be successful. My advice to you is just keep trusting God.
Oh, that's good.
So in a similar fashion, since that's the way our world works, if you have a this, you have a that. So thank you for your elaboration on success. So how has then failure worked for you?
Failure is the stepping blocks to success. There's no one that I've read about, and I still like to read, that has never failed on many levels. I've heard it said that successful people fail more than failures. They just keep going.
There it is.
So
that's right.
Yep.
You have to keep going. Yeah.
So what is of your story? Okay. So you've got this great story, and I'll say this, if I could issue this challenge to you and to anyone else, always measure yourself and your level of belief in your own success in the level of fulfillment and legacy that you're creating. Success is not measured externally. It's internal.
That's true.
Your fulfillment, when you find those moments where you're like, this is where I know I belong. This is what builds me inside. And you know that you're passing that on. You're building a legacy.
Yes. That's
success. And you're doing that, my friend. You have a ministry now.
Yes, sir.
Look at you. So be proud of that. What is your legacy, if you had to define it?
I would assume my legacy would be just showing others that there's more to life than where they are and what they do. That would be my legacy, to just be that example for someone to know that, yeah, you can make mistakes, but yeah, you can bounce back. You can do that. My legacy would be poured out to those who don't always look, feel, think, or act like what conventional wisdom tells you that we are. I've been doing a lot of reading about different people, and some of the people that we think are what makes them successful, they had many struggles. They had many things that drove them, like you said, down the path that they did. And if it wasn't for those struggles and being driven on that path, they might not have never discovered their true purpose in life. So,
yeah. Well, that's great.
It is.
So what's next for you?
I really don't know. I've had a desire to write write about my life. I love to, my ideal goal, my ideal job would be for me to be a motivational speaker to some degree. And I guess I found out myself doing that more than I do preaching. I teach more than I preach, but I always try to encourage and uplift. And I'm just finding myself naturally going in that direction. I mean, I teach on my job. I train life critical procedures and policies. And then when I go to prisons, I teach. And when I go to the youth places, I go and I try to teach. And so it seems to be like that's the direction that my life is leading into. And I don't really know what all. I mean, there's still this carnal part of me that looks up and like, you're not no spring chicken. So whatever you're doing, you better do it fast.
Well, look, no, I'm going to argue with that carnal part because we had a guest on our show last week that at 76 years old, he just graduated from college.
Wow.
Yes. So don't think about the age.
Yes.
Just keep reinventing yourself, my friend. So I'm going to tell you, if it's okay, one of my favorite things about your story and the way that you tell it is the lack of shame. You told that with boldness, with confidence, with conviction. I can't say that it's completely gone because I don't live inside your head.
Right.
But I feel like you have taken ownership of that fat kid that used to hide in the back of your head.
You have to.
And that is enormously transformational and inspiring to others to see that. I mean, you exude it. So that's beautiful. Keep that going.
Thank you.
Because that inner voice of shame is what drives people the wrong way.
It never stops.
Yes.
Right.
So when we go talk to those people and those kids in those bad circumstances in prison or whatever it may be, that's what they're dealing with.
Yes, sir.
That inner voice of shame.
Right. Yes, sir.
And I just love the way that you deliver your entire story with, I mean, you sit up straight in the chair. There was none of that shame. And I love that. I love that because that's where the power is. That's where the legacy is built from, is that ownership of who you've been, but where you're going,
right?
Who you're becoming still.
One of our mottos is being an owner creator. There was owner, and then creator is that message that you're sending. Wow. From that ownership came this recreation and recreation. You keep coming up with applicable versions. So speaking of, so here you are now, obviously speaking to many people, but your passion seems to be the young person's. And your age is about their age, okay? They're 14, 15, 16. Here you are rolling up on 16. You got all these things going on in your mind, and then you get this one divert opportunity, and that pretty much owns your life, for decades to come. But if you could speak to, say, that mid-teen or a mid-teen that may be listening, what message would you want to leave them with today?
I would say, first of all, be careful of your friends. And your parents aren't your enemies. They really desire to see something different and better for your life. They're at a very critical point in life that if you're a young man, you're not a boy anymore, yet you're not quite a man.
Right.
So you toggle back and forth between the two. And the same thing with a young woman. Your bodies are changing, things are happening. You got a world of stuff that's going on among you. And if I would say anything to you, is just hold on, just try to rationalize and get out of yourself. And I know it's hard. Right. It's hard for a youth to understand and look forward, but you have to. A lot of these kids, they're not dumb.
No,
they have an extreme amount of wisdom. They just lack the guidance and some discipline. And some of that is going to have to come from within. It can't come from without, because there are plenty of young people who do extraordinary things in their life, and they seem to have the right method or the right application of all their lives. And so for those that don't, try to find people that are doing something that you want to be like.
That's beautiful. And I mean, you alluded to that earlier, how even later in life, you were constantly seeking a mentor.
Yes.
You were constantly seeking someone to emulate. I'm doing the same thing.
Yes, sir.
I'm constantly looking for somebody else who I can see ways I can improve and mentorship moments for them to give to me.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, we should never stop doing that.
No,
Correct.
no.
And sometimes it is live action. It's the men we get to hang around. Sometimes it's through books.
Yes,
sometimes it's through little videos and things.
Yeah.
We get to listen to people's message because it can reach more a broader audience. But it's that passion to seek.
Yes.
And hopefully that's being instilled in these young people. Hey, don't pass these little 15-minute meetings we're having.
Yeah.
There's more meetings to have.
More.
Yeah.
Right.
And it may not be with a person.
That
should be with a piece of literature somebody leaves with you, and that message is in there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but you have to have that heart to seek it, though. If you're wanting it, you'll see it. If you're
Yes,
not wanting it, you'll read right past it, and you'll miss it.
I firmly believe that all about this young generation, they all desire to be taught discipline. And I don't care what their actions show. They want that.
Yeah.
You can see a well-disciplined person come in who's assertive, and you would automatically even watch the most unruliest young teenager get in line. And there's something about that. I remember early in my days, I would watch and I'd see different people do things, and discipline is it's something different.
Yeah.
And so they do it. But the right discipline and the right motives behind it is where we fall short. A lot of people join different gangs and activities, and I would often tell the guys that are in the penitentiaries and in the youth facilities that, you wouldn't listen to your mom, you wouldn't listen to the police officer, and yet you're going to go back here, come behind these walls, and listen to somebody that's dressed like you, that has to fall by the same rules. But you'll listen to them. Why? Because there are going to be some behaviors that'll happen if you don't listen once you join this organization. And I'm like, well, how silly is it to be in this position and then listen to somebody that doesn't have anything going for them like you, other than the fact that they can tell you what to do. So why not listen to somebody that wants better and more for you in your life? And sometimes the light comes on, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
And then sometimes there's some that have that look like, well, I know, but now I'm in it. I can't get out.
I feel like it's too late.
For some, it could be not that you can't get out, but it's not going to be easy.
They're going to be there a minute.
Yeah, it's not going to be easy to get out.
But it's their transformational opportunity.
Yes.
Just like it was for you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So we've had a great interview with you. We've missed a lot of topics we didn't touch on.
I'm sorry, I'm so long.
No, there's nothing to be sorry about. You were amazing.
Yes.
And I don't want you to think that there was any regret to be had. Your testimony is beautiful. Your story is beautiful. And I don't want you to feel as though you've been shortchanged. So as we draw this to a close, there are some traditional questions that we ask as we close. But before we do, is there anything that you'd like to say? Any message that you'd like to send that you haven't yet that you'd like to send to the audience? There's no pressure, but you're welcome to say anything you'd like.
If I'm going to leave one message, I'd say this: give God a try. If you haven't, give him a try.
Pretty safe experiment.
Change your world. Trust me.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Chuck, is there anything you'd like to ask?
No more questions, but just thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. It's a journey that it's almost biblical in nature.
It really is.
All of the near to death experiences, if you will, as far as like either possible life in prison,
yes,
and all of those sorts of things,
yes,
and all of the dangerous things you were doing, in some sense of illegitimate fulfillment, but it could have gone the wrong way. You
Definitely
mentioned that, and but you persevered, and you found a way. But talking about receiving just that down to almost nothing moment, when God took it all away, I was standing there completely exposed. They literally took my clothes off.
Yeah.
I had nothing, and realizing that you only had one way. So somewhere down in there was the seed of that fruit. It has started growing. So thank you for sharing that with our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very inspirational.
Yes.
And so traditionally there is a closing question that I ask all our guests.
Okay.
It's my favorite question because it shows, it's pretty deep. And for you, I'm super curious, like where this is going to go.
Yeah.
So if you could go back in time, okay, So we're going to take you all the way back to 17. I know what happened at 16. That was a pivotal moment, but we're going to only go to 17 after that pivot had already happened. If you could go back in time and whisper into your own ear some profound advice, what would you say to young Sanders at 17 years old? That's all you can do is talk to him, like as if you were his conscience talking to this young man.
I would say to me at 17 years old, don't sell yourself short. There are still things you can do. I wanted to go to college. I didn't feel like I had the wherewithal, the knowledge or anything else. And so I would just say, man, just dig in, hold fast to what is real and true in your life, and don't just keep trying to cover up, but face life. Just face life and it'll be okay. Now, trying to escape doesn't get you anywhere, but make it worse. And that's what I did. Food, drugs, women, whatever. I didn't want to feel like I felt. And now it's okay. It's okay. It still sucks sometimes, right? But it's okay. That's life. It's okay. So that's what I would go back and tell myself, man, it's going to be okay. Just feel it and then get through with it.
That's good. That's good. And I want you to know I appreciate you being here today. I believe our audience is definitely getting a lot out of your story, your testimony. Thank you for taking the time out of your life and being a part of the Pursuit of Purpose podcast. It means a lot to us.
Yes, it does.
Do you have any questions for us? There's one I've never asked, I don't think.
I don't think so.
No, I want you guys to know I'll be praying for you. I love this opportunity that I've had. I've also been terribly terrified the whole time. But you guys do make me feel comfortable. I love what you're doing. And I'm going to just tune in and be a very strong supporter of all that you guys got.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again. Well, out there in our audience, thank you for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we've had with us
Sanders Wilkerson.
I hope you guys enjoyed his story at least half as much as we did, because we got the world out of it and more. You guys have a great day, and we'll see you soon.